MCARBO brother, I'm Chris Nelson, President of MCARBO. Really excited to introduce the new Smith Wesson SD9VE, SD40VE trigger spring kit for your Smith Wesson pistol. Love the trigger pull reduction we got. 35% trigger pull reduction from 7 1/4 down to 4 3/4. Really love how smooth and clean this trigger feels. As you rail out, it breaks perfectly. Love this, really excited about it. I love how we were able to put this together, something you guys had recommended. Brought it to you. Really nice, smooth, clean breaking trigger now for your SD9VE, SD40VE. Let's get on our tabletop, show you we put this in. Parts needed for this build, the Smith Wesson SD9VE, SD40VE trigger spring kit by MCARBO includes a lighter striker spring, a lighter trigger return spring, and a lighter striker block spring, as well as the assembly tool, really handy. Tools needed for this build, 1/16 inch punch, 3/32 inch punch, 1/8 inch punch, hammer, bench block, micro tip, flathead, synthetic grease, PTFE. As always, guys, make sure you're wearing iPro. Before we get started, let's go ahead and take this opportunity together. Check our firearms, make sure they're clear. Check the chamber, check the bolt face, check the magazine well. This firearm's clear. Let's see what kind of factory trigger pull we're starting with. 7 pounds, 9.5 ounces. Let's take one more to confirm. 7 pounds, 7.7 ounces. All right, so we start with a simple field strip. It's very similar to the Glock, so similar that Smith & Wesson actually got sued by Glock over this, and Glock did win. So you need to pull the trigger before you can pull down these release tabs here. So we'll just check it always one more time. Obsessive compulsive, it's a good habit. All right, it's very clear. We already did it. Pull the trigger, good. Now you're gonna pull back just a hair like that, and then pull down on these tabs right here, and then slide it forward. So we get the slide here and the frame here. We'll put the frame down for a second. We'll just take apart the slide first. We can start by removing the recoil spring and guide rod. You just press in on it, and it pops right out, just like that. You can set this aside, and the barrel will come right out, just like that. You just push up from the underside, and it'll come right out. Now we can go ahead and remove the rest of the components. We're gonna remove the back plate here. So take your micro tip, and there's a little sleeve in there, right on the striker assembly. See that? So we're just going to compress that sleeve just like this, and then we're going to push up on the back plate. It comes right off. Set your back plate aside, and then we're going to pull out on the striker assembly. There's the striker assembly. All right, we'll get to that just in a second. Put that down. Now we need to get the striker block out. Now you can do some polishing on the striker block as well. You can even do a little sanding there with 1000 grit silicon carbide sandpaper. If you watch the Glock trigger job video that we did, you can see how we polished everything. It's exactly the same. All right, now in order to remove that striker block, we need to remove this extractor. So there's a hinge pin right here that holds the extractor in place. We're just going to tap it out. So set it up on the bench block. Use your 1/16 inch punch. We'll just tap it out. May not need to tap it all the way through. All right, I can already feel that tension on the punch now. So we're gonna leave it halfway out like this. You can pop it all the way out, it doesn't matter. So we'll pull out the punch. Now we can remove the extractor, and notice the orientation here. And that little striker block is gonna pop out too. So having your thumb over it's gonna be handy so it doesn't go flying away on you. This is the orientation, so when we put it back in, this little feature is pointing down, just like that. All right, so this extractor is what captures the striker block in place. So when we go to put it back in, we're going to compress that striker block safety, and we're going to lock it in place with the extractor just like that in this orientation. All right, we'll set that down. You can leave the spring in or you can pop it out. We're just going to do a quick exchange here. So remove that striker block safety, just falls out like that. All right, so here's your striker block safety with the factory striker block safety spring. Okay, and like I said, you can do some polishing, you can touch this up. There's some burrs on here, so if you feel it with the fingernail, you know, this is what the trigger bar rides on to compress this, so you can polish it up. Do a little tiny fine sanding to get rid of some of those machine marks. It'll be really smooth and clean afterwards. All right, let's go ahead and open up the MCARBO kit so we can swap this spring. All right, so we got our Smith & Wesson SD9VE, SD40VE trigger spring kit by MCARBO. Gonna give us a nice, light, smooth trigger pull. So this is what you're gonna get in the kit. You're gonna get the lighter striker spring, lighter striker block safety spring, and a lighter trigger return spring, as well as the assembly tool. This goes with the trigger return spring here. It makes it really easy. It's a lifesaver. It's nice to have that convenience. We always try to think about those things. How can we make it as easy for you guys when you're installing these parts? All right, so we just need the striker block safety spring for now, so we'll take that, set the rest of them aside. Oh, there's something new too that we're doing. Now you got a little target on the inside, so there it is. Something useful for that paper that comes with it. All right, let's do a quick comparison here. So I got the factory spring here on my left, the MCARBO spring here on my right. So you can see a very big difference there between tension. This MCARBO spring's a lot lighter, so that's gonna be nice. It's all going to help with a combined nice drop in trigger pull. So it's all good, I love it. All right, we'll set the stock spring aside. We're going to take our lighter MCARBO striker block safety spring, we're going to install that. Take that synthetic grease, this is a nice little tip here. Put a little bit on the end of that spring, and what that's going to do, it's almost going to keep it captured in place, which is going to be really handy because you can turn it over, drop it in, you don't have to worry about it falling out or losing it or anything like that. So now we're ready to go. We can drop it right in. If you want, you can put a little grease on this as well to help smooth it up if you're not polishing it. So now we'll just drop our striker block safety and spring into that same pocket right there in the slide. Drops right in. All right, make sure your extractor spring's still in place. All right, now we can go ahead and put the extractor back in. We're going to drop in the extractor just like this. Just get that little tab to go around the portion of the slide. It'll locate on the inside, just like that. All right, so you'll notice the striker block safety, it hasn't been compressed and located inside the extractor yet. You can see how it's sticking up above this portion of the slide right here. All right, so what we'll do is we'll compress it, we'll push in on the striker block safety, all right, and we'll compress the extractor in place, and then it should lock and locate and hold it. So it's already captured, holding that striker block safety. You can see it's beneath this portion of the slide now. All right, what we'll do is keep pressure on it. We're going to tap in this portion right here. All right, just kind of get it started so that it's captured, held in place, makes life a little easier. Now we can tap this pin the rest of the way through. Take your 1/8 inch punch and just center up on it. Try not to hit your slide. All right, good and flush. Now we'll take the 1/16 and we'll just give it another little tap. All right, we just want it recessed all the way. Same on this side, we don't want it sticking all the way through or anything like that. All right, so we're good to go. Now we can go ahead and swap out the springs on that striker assembly. So grab your striker assembly. The factory spring is green on this one. So what we're gonna do is just compress this spring right here and remove these two little caps. That's what holds it in place. So we'll just push down on this portion of the striker on the bench block. You're gonna push down on that striker spring and those two little half circles will pop out. That's what holds it in place. Very similar to the Glock. So there they are right there. All right, we'll just set that down. We'll let that spring ride up. And there's the factory spring. And you'll notice here in the rest of the striker, there's a striker sleeve with the spring on the inside. So we'll just leave that all in place right there, just like that. And we can do a quick little comparison. So the factory one's right here on my left. It's this green one. And there's the MCARBO spring. So you can see lighter spring, more springiness to it. All right, it's a nice combined reduction, all of these lighter springs. So we'll put this factory spring aside. I got a little bag going. It's definitely handy to keep them all separated. You don't want to get them mixed up, but that one's easy to tell apart. All right, so we'll put the MCARBO spring on the striker, slides right over, just like that. We're going to compress it, do the same thing. Put those little cups back in. Let's take one at a time and just drop it in place. And just kind of pinch them together and let that spring ride up. And it's going to capture, and hold it all in place just like that. It's a very similar design to the Glock. So if you're familiar with it, this will be a breeze for you. All right, now we can go ahead and put our striker assembly right back in the slide. Okay, we're just going to slide it right in, just like that. Simple. Now we're going to compress that plastic sleeve back there, take our micro tip and hold it right here. All right, and then take the back plate and drop it right in place. And let go of that sleeve and it's all captured. All right, so we'll just check real quick, make sure this back plate's on and good and secure, good. Now we'll check the operation of this striker block safety. Just push it up and down, good. Now we'll make sure this extractor moves. Just push it a little bit, it's under a lot of tension. Now we're gonna check the operation of the striker block safety. So push forward on that striker, nothing, good. Push down on the striker block safety. There you go, see the firing pin there? All right, man, we're good to go. So we can set the slide down for a second. Let's go ahead and just drop in that barrel while we're at it. So it's all complete and ready for us. And then put your captured recoil spring and guide rod in just like this. A little smaller end of the guide rod is going to go into the front of the barrel here. And then you're going to push down on that assembly, compress it, and it's going to snap right in place just like that, right on that bottom portion of the barrel. All right, so we're good to go there. And we are ready to move on to the frame. All right, so now we're getting ready to jump into the disassembly of the frame. So we'll just go over a couple things real quick. So your slide stop lever assembly here, your locking block here, and your trigger and trigger return spring are down here. You can see that trigger return spring there. Your trigger bar, and your ejector, and then your sear housing back here. We won't have to remove the sear housing, which is a plus. We'll leave it in place. Simply just going to push out that trigger hinge pin, and the trigger, the locking block, and the slide stop assembly are all going to come out. All right, so frame disassembly, we're just going to tap out this trigger hinge pin right here. So flip it over to this side. So the right side is where we're going to actually tap out that pin. Take your 1/8 inch punch, All right, taps right through just like that. The reason we flipped it over is because you can see these little notches right here. All right, they actually locate on different portions of the assembly in there, so it's a little more difficult if you push it through with the notches. We're just pushing the smooth end out. All right, so we'll take out the hinge pin, set that down. Now we can remove the locking block here, just slides right out. All right, we can set that down. Now you'll see your slide stop assembly right here. All right, we can just pull that up and out. And notice that that hinge pin needs to locate through that hole on the slide stop assembly. This spring right here is going to be captured under the locking block. So we'll go over that again in a minute. Now your trigger and your trigger bar, and notice you got your trigger return spring in there, and see how that's oriented and captured at the bottom. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll pull this out. It is captured back here on this portion of the sear housing, so that's something we just have to kind of wiggle our way through. We'll push up the trigger. All right, we'll get this portion up and out, and then we'll just slide out the trigger bar like that. So this portion of the frame, we don't need to remove anything else. We're good. We can leave that sear housing in place. So we'll set the frame down for a second. We're going to focus on this trigger bar, particularly this trigger return spring. We're going to swap that out real quick. Just notice how that open end right here of the loop is facing up, and that closed end of the loop is facing forward. So we're going to replicate that. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll pull out this trigger return spring. Just got to pop it right off that little loop right there. Set the factory spring aside. Grab the lighter MCARBO trigger return spring. All right, we're going to repeat the same orientation, so we want that little opening on that loop facing up and this closed end facing forward. So we're going to hook that portion of the trigger bar with that little open loop on the trigger return spring, and that closed end is facing forward. Now you'll notice the MCARBO spring doesn't have any of that cotton inside. Doesn't need it, it's for sound mitigation. The spring's lighter, it doesn't make any creaking or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about it. We'll take our little assembly tool and we're going to drop it right through. Make sure that loop is pointing straight up. Make sure you can see right through those holes. Want to capture that loop on that trigger return spring just like that. All right, we're good to go. So we can drop it right in like this. This makes a world of difference. Keeps it in place. You don't have to try to fight the alignment once it's in. All right, so we're going to drop our trigger bar with the lighter trigger return spring back into the frame. This little portion here, we need to go ahead and locate first before we do that. So you're going to take that little extended portion and hook it underneath just like this. All right, now we're going to drop in that trigger, so we'll just push back on the trigger until we can get that blade all the way through. All right, simple as that. So everything's pretty much set, ready to go. We go ahead and drop in the rest of the components. I got my little assembly tool sticking out on me right there, so I'm going to push it back in. Just want to make sure that it's flush on both sides. Don't want any portion of it sticking out. Now we're going to take our slide stop assembly. We're going to drop it right in. Goes in right here. Locates like that. All right, so slide stop assembly is in place. We're going to have to line up these holes here in a second, so don't worry about it just yet. Grab your locking block. We're going to insert it in this orientation, just like this. Drops right in over top of the slide stop assembly and the trigger. Want to make sure that spring is captured. So drops right in, compresses everything just like that. All right, looking pretty good here. Now we'll just go ahead and inspect our slide stop and spring. Just want to make sure that spring is sitting on top of that slide stop just like that. You don't want it kicked over like over here or anything. So it's sitting on top. We're gonna have to compress that, get the holes to line up good. So we'll take our trigger hinge pin. Smooth end is gonna go in first on the left-hand side of the frame like this. All right, so we got our trigger hinge pin inserted. Now the slide stop assembly, we need to get that hole on the slide stop assembly through the pin. So what we'll do is we need to push up, kind of maneuver this slide stop assembly a little bit with our micro tip. Just like that. So I just pushed up on the slide stop assembly, just push through on that pin, and it'll pop right in. It's most likely what you're gonna have to do because it is under spring tension right here. So you can see that spring's captured under the locking block. So you just need to push up on that striker block assembly and it'll pop right through just like that right there. All right, so now we just need to get the trigger lined up, push that assembly tool all the way through. You can see how this would be a pain if you didn't have the assembly tool because you'd be trying to get that loop over that pin while you're pushing it through. Nightmare. All right, so now that we got that striker block assembly captured on the hinge pin, it's really the hardest part because it's under tension right there as it's compressing against the locking block. You can see that yellow spring there. So what we'll do now is we're going to look through this opposite side. We want to line up the holes on the trigger so we can push it all the way through. Now once it starts going through, we will have to likely maneuver the coil on that spring, that trigger return spring, to fit over that pin. You'll notice here in a second, we'll go through it. All right, so I'm just going to push down the table as I'm looking through this hole, trying to line it all up. All right, started to push through. Now I'm going to inspect and see how that trigger return spring's looking. and you can see it grabbed it and kind of pinched it over here on the end. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of come in here with the micro tip, and I'm just going to push that trigger return spring, that coil, back onto the pin a little bit. All right, just like that. See it kind of pop in place, and now just push that pin the rest of the way through. Here's the assembly tool, and we're good to go. That is great. That is the easiest way to do it. Now something else on this trigger hinge pin, you want to push it a little bit back and forth. Here, snap in place. All right, that slide stop assembly just located on the pin. So now we're good. The pin is captured, it won't walk out or anything like that. So you can push it back and forth and it won't move. All right, so everything's located, retained in place. Pull the trigger, make sure the operation's moving smoothly. You can see the trigger bar, everything's engaging, moving. Excellent. All right, so now we can grab our slide and just go ahead and line it up on the rails, slide it back. Let's do a quick little function check. So we'll go ahead and pull that trigger. Whew, man, that feels good. All right, hold it back, listen for the reset. Perfect. Nice. It's still a good solid reset too. That's what I like about this. So we did go lighter on that trigger return spring, but we didn't compromise anything. So that's always kind of the philosophy as we're designing kits for triggers. We want to make sure that it's not going to compromise any sort of that reliable functionality or any sort of that inherent function that we require. A nice, good, crisp reset. We don't want a sluggish, slow reset. Phenomenal, man. Really excited. Let's measure this trigger pull. All right, let's see what kind of modified trigger pull we got. 4 pounds, 12.9 ounces. All right, let's take one more to confirm. 4 pounds, 13.3 ounces. Well, there you have it, guys. 35% trigger pull reduction for your Smith & Wesson SD9VE. Feels amazing. As you reel out, it's perfect, man. Right there, 4 3/4, that's a sweet spot. You don't really need any lighter than that, you know, for what it is. Duty carry pistol, I mean, this is perfect, man. This is really nice. Plus, you can do that additional polishing if you like to really smoothen it out, but I don't think it's that gritty, surprisingly. That's something that Smith & Wesson did really nice on this. I think they just did a pretty good job on the machining part. So it's pretty clean, smooth, but you can always do a little extra to it. 4 3/4, just can't beat that. 35% trigger pull reduction, really love it. Thank you, MCARBO Brotherhood, for all your ideas and your support. And as always, happy shooting.